get to this story, y'all. Because I saw this shit, like I said, on NBC News with Lester Holt, and it didn't sound right. And usually when the shit don't sound right, it's probably some nonsense, some foolery, some mainstream media propaganda manipulation shenanigans attached to it. And I was right. So, this week in Pittsburgh's Garfield neighborhood, we got any Pittsburghians? What do we call people from Pittsburgh? Any Pittsburghites? Any Pittsburghers? What do we call people from Pittsburgh? No disrespect, I just don't know. But shout out to everybody from Pittsburgh, especially shout out to the whole Garfield neighborhood, right? Um, there was a shooting in which a 62-year-old man was killed, and several deputies, I believe they were from Allegheny County, if I'm not mistaken, they were injured. Northern Witch DD, thank you so much, baby, for your support. Thank you so much for your super chat support and all of your support, D. You are wonderful. I want us to take to the clips because I've got several clips here. And let me give content warnings. Again, we don't see the actual killing of this man, but there was a lot of gunshots, y'all. The choppers was singing every which way on Broad Street in Garfield in Pittsburgh on that day. So the content warning, especially if you were a bit sensitive to sound, especially sensitive or may have some PTSD associated with the sound of gunshots, there's going to be a lot of gunshots being heard in these upcoming clips. I'm going to come through and credit these people after the fact. But the first clip we're going to see are and hear are the volley of automatic and semi-automatic gunfire being shot from the law enforcement into a home on Broad Street, I believe. The next clip we're going to see is going to come from WTAE television, where we are going to hear from the son of the victim's name is William Bill Hutchinson. And Mr. Hutchinson has been described as a Moorish sovereign citizen. I don't know much, if anything, about Moorish sovereign citizens. When judging from some of the packages I was watching, they kind of sound like more about it Hebrew Israelites, right? Now the Hebrew Israelites, the only thing I really know about them, I believe they believe that they's the original Jewish people or the original Israelites. I don't know. I'm not going to speak out of turn because I don't, and I'm not familiar with these particular disciplines and what their belief systems are. But what I do know is that these folks believe that the state does not have any say, any control, any authority over their lives. Now, that is a philosophy that I generally agree with, right? Even when the whites do it, even when the fucking Bundys do it out on the Bundy Ranch and they was blaming on the fucking, feds and shit, tell them to get the fuck off their land, even though it wasn't their fucking land. Isn't that something? But it's a spirit I generally support, really, from anybody. You know what I'm saying? Especially when it's coming from indigenous people who know that they are still sovereign nations, right? So anybody that wants to assert their autonomy absent of the U.S. government, I generally support that shit, right? Even though I don't know the particulars of their beliefs, so let me not co-sign because again, I don't know, but what I do know is like, all right, cool. Y'all say the state don't have authority over you. Yeah, I support that. Cool. So again, the second package is going to be the second clip that you're going to see is the reporter from WTAE on speakerphone with Mr. Hutchinson's son, asking him to please stand down and surrender. He did not. And then the final clip we're going to see is that we are going to hear from Pittsburgh's mayor, who's a youngish black dude, but who said that he actually was a friend of the family. He didn't know the victim directly, but he knew people related to him. And you could tell that this mayor seemingly was affected by the murder of this elder. And then we're going to get into why this man was killed, why he was mislabeled as a squatter, in his family home, and why the police came in knowing that he likely was armed, he likely was about this action, and the disregard that the police showed for the neighborhood and for the people in proximity of all of this when they decided to take this heavy-handed action to go in blamming for an eviction. Absolute craziness. So anyway, content warning for gunshots, content warning, trigger warnings. Let's hit it, Will.
Andrew, we spoke to the son of William Hardison, whose name is also William Hardison. He is a truck driver based in Atlanta. We spoke to him while he was on the road. He was in Ohio, and he and his family have been trying all day to try to get a hold of his father and beg him to come out. And he talked to us in the hopes that his father would hear this message.
Hey, Dad, please surrender. Please give up. You have children and grandchildren. I love you dearly. Please stand down.
What's he like as a person?
He's a great. He's a very stern individual. You know, he's a man's man. You know what I mean? But he stands on what he believes in, and when he believes in something, he's gonna fight tooth and nail about it. You know, but he's a great person outside of that. You know what I mean? So.
Based on what we were talking about earlier, does he believe that this house rightfully belongs to him?
Yes, very much so.
Why is that?
Because my uncle, my uncle passed away. You know what I mean? And he, like I said, he only had a few more years left to pay on the house. You know what I mean? So why would they sell it to someone for $25,000? When hundreds of thousands of dollars have been put into that house. You know what I mean? They just redid the house. They just remodeled the house in the process of him passing away.
And as you could hear from the son, this house has been the subject of a series of transactions involving family members, which led to the eviction. Basically, the house was owned by William Hardison's brother. He died last year, and then his father took over possession of the house under terms of the will, and then the father sold the house to a local real estate company, and they are the ones who began the eviction proceedings because they claim William Hardison was squatting here and he had not paid rent for 5 months and he had no legitimate right to the house. And the eviction was to take place this morning at 10:30, and that is when the confrontation began with police. But as the son said, the father believed that the house was rightfully his. Reporting live in Garfield, Paul Van Osdol, Pittsburgh's Action News 4.
Up to everybody. I do know members of his family. A lot of his family members I grew up with. So I do know members of the family. I do not know him. I have spoken to the family today, the ones that I know, offered my condolence and had a conversation with them. We grew up together. And again, I just want to say condolence to the family. We've also had the opportunity to search our 311 to see if there was any other regards of upcoming information from him. None of it came about a meeting with me. And you know that I meet with a lot of people, but he was never on the list to meet with. I wish there would have been. Maybe we could have got a different result. I would also.
A very stark scene there in Pittsburgh. Guys, I don't know much about Pittsburgh. I've only been there once. I know that, like most cities, it's going through a gentrification of its black neighborhoods. I can imagine that the Garfield neighborhood is probably part of that. And there have been a lot of predatory methods enacted against longtime black residents of black neighborhoods in cities all across this country, right? And sometimes these companies are very insidious. They are harassing to a certain extent. I live in what I consider to be a gentrifying part of Prince George's County. And the number of mail solicitations that I get, and I'm gonna name the companies from Market Pro Home Buyers, Express Home Buyers, we buy your house in 7 days. Like they are targeting black and brown communities for these quick home sales to get you to fuck up out the house. They'll buy the house as is. The house need a new roof, house falling down. They don't give a shit. They'll write the check. Get your black ass up out of here. We're gonna fix this shit up and sell it at $150,000 more to some white folks, maybe more than that. If we talking about DC, right? Afra, am I right? If we talk about Brooklyn, New York, am I right? Like they are trying to get black folks the fuck up out of these cities no matter what. And I'm not here to assume that whatever method or basically whatever the real estate company or the Allegheny Police Department, Allegheny County deputies, sheriff's deputies got to say that this man was squatting. How the fuck was he squatting in his brother's house? According to the Sun, that they just spent thousands of dollars of renovations on. Like, something's not adding up here. Something's not making sense. And the fact that the police knew, because there was at least one police encounter that I was able to find on TikTok. The quality wasn't that good, so I didn't include it in my clips. But this brother, Mr. Hardison, my apologies. I was saying I misspoke on his name. William Bill Hardison. It is pouring down rain here. Mr. Hardison had previous encounters with police where he let them know that I'm a Moorish sovereign citizen, and he started waving the Moroccan flag. Now, again, I'm ignorant to the philosophies of the Moorish sovereign citizens, but he was very clearly not with the shits. Like his son even said, you heard the son when asked, how would you describe your father? He almost started to say he was a good guy, but then he changed it and said he was a very stern man. We can read between the lines. Bill Hardison did not play that dumb shit very clearly, right? We could tell. And that initial clip with the volley of bullets, y'all, they said thousands of rounds. I found packages, and I didn't want to take all of WTAE's reporting. And I will say they seemingly covered it pretty well. But it was black women in particular being evacuated from the neighborhood, right? They said that there were bullets flying into their houses. This one woman was praising God, saying, but for the grace of God, that bullet came whizzing by my head. Why would police go in heavy-handed into a residential area at 10:30 in the morning to try to evict a man that they likely knew that was armed, likely knew that he was willing to be confrontational with police? Did they want this shootout? Is this what they wanted to happen? Judging by their actions, possibly so. I want us to take a look at a package from a TikToker that I found, who is seemingly a resident of the Pittsburgh area. And I thought they actually did a very good job of describing what was going on. Hold on really quick. For our previous collage of clips, let me credit. The clip of the mayor's press conference was shot by Paula Reed Ward, I believe, who is a reporter for Trib Live. Who is that other person? That middle clip. Kiera Gunderson shot the first clip of the gunfire exchange. So I just wanted to properly credit the journalists there and their work. So thank you for that. So I want us to take a look at this TikToker. His name is Nick Drum, Drom. And I thought he had a very interesting take. It's pretty nuanced and pretty descriptive regarding the practices of some of these, quote, real estate companies that behave in a predatory manner, particularly towards Black and brown residents of neighborhoods that these real estate companies would like to flip over to white. Will, let's take a look at that TikTok, please.
As I record this, we're currently over 5 hours into a standoff involving police and a man that they tried to evict in the Garfield neighborhood of Pittsburgh, just less than a mile from Children's Hospital. Law enforcement officers from the city, county, state, and federal agents, including the ATF and FBI, are on the scene, and there have been thousands of rounds of gunfire exchanged. The conflict began at 10:30 a.m. when sheriff deputies went to serve an eviction notice. Some neighbors were saying that they were given notice by the sheriff's office that this was going to happen, while other neighbors said that they were given no notice, despite the sheriff's office knowing that this man was armed and that this could become a conflict. Property records show that the suspect who's barricaded himself inside the home is a relative to the former owner of the property. You can see that earlier this year, the property was sold to 907 East Street LLC. That LLC's address is tied to the address of Penn Pioneer Enterprises. Their website says that they are a real estate wholesaler located in Trafford in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. If you aren't familiar with the predatory nature of real estate wholesaling, they are the people that are sending out millions of texts to homeowners all over the country saying that they buy property, any property, and they're mostly looking for distressed property or property that's underwater. Almost all of the companies that operate in this space violate FTC laws around text-based communication. They often target low-income neighborhoods where residents are more likely to be in trouble with their mortgage. Interestingly, when you search Penn Pioneer, one of the only articles that come up is an article about sheriff sales, where one buyer discussed that it's uncomfortable evicting people. A representative from Penn Pioneer proudly states that he enjoys the work that he does. I wanted to discuss this issue because I lived in the apartment downstairs from where a similar eviction went awry and there was a similar standoff less than a mile from where this one's happened. In that instance, it was a sister evicting her brother so she could sell the property. The brother refused to leave and made threats to the sheriffs, which began a several-hour standoff where sheriff's deputies shot hundreds of rounds of chemical munitions into the apartment. I received no prior notice that the sheriff's office was going to try again to enforce his eviction, even though they had been there multiple times and he had made threats prior. I actually wasn't even contacted by law enforcement to see if I was home until after they started firing chemical munitions. Fortunately, I was not home, but the fact that I was a second thought to the SWAT team after they started to engage with weapons certainly left me concerned. It made me feel that law enforcement was so eager to violently engage, the health and safety and well-being of surrounding residents was disregarded. I also experienced another instance where the same SWAT team responded to a barricaded individual. And officers set up sniper stations on neighbors' porches without notifying the residents of those homes they were preparing to engage in a gunfight. Many outlets are reporting this as an eviction standoff or a squatter standoff. But this whole event, encompassing the thousands of rounds of gunfire exchanged, demonstrates that this event is tied to much bigger, more complicated systemic issues in our society. Many issues that legislators are currently doing nothing to relieve, making it so horrible events like this are only more likely to happen. A reasonable person might ask why there are not more intermediate steps in an eviction like this, possibly involving mental health professionals and social workers. And why there's not more action taken on the side of law enforcement officers when they are creating dangerous situations that could impact neighbors. I understand policing is very hard work and understand that in situations like this, things move very fast. But I believe that if we are going to put officer safety as a priority in these situations, we should also consider the safety of the neighbors.
The problem is that under capitalism, the police are there to protect the property owners, right? The police are there to enforce the will of those that own shit, right? In our society. It is not in the interest of a capitalist system to try to make sure that the working people or the people that are at most risk of becoming unhoused for a variety of reasons, they don't care about trying to mitigate those people's circumstances. They're there at the behest of the capitalists to make sure that as much can be extracted from someone living in this property as quickly as possible, as much as possible, as immediately as possible. Okay? This is why this system is falling down. And this is why we have to make sure that we have to help it to fall down. Okay? We have to push it down. If capitalism is teetering, if the whole American system is unbalanced and looking like it might fall, well, it's our job to help push it down. And I feel as though Mr. Hardison, in his own way, was probably trying to do that. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, I can't come on here and say that I endorse whatever the fuck. Y'all can probably deduce how I feel. I don't have to say it, right? Like if the police blamed on him, what's he supposed to do? Not blame? You feel me? So I can understand why he took the position that he did. I feel sorry for his children, for his grandchildren, that they are now without their loved one. But I can understand why this man decided to take a stand in that way. Okay? Let me clean it up. I may not agree, but I understand. So, to the TikToker's point, shout out to Nick. I actually appreciated that package when he talked about, shouldn't we have some steps in place to try to make sure that these processes are done a lot better. There's nobody should be unhoused in this country. America, allegedly the richest country in the world. Why do we have literally hundreds of thousands of people not only living on the streets, but living in encampments? Like, it's not like homelessness is not simply an urban problem, right? You go into the rural areas, suburban areas. In my hometown where I grew up, in Laurel, Maryland, y'all, Laurel, as suburban as it fucking gets. It ain't quite the tree-lined streets of Columbia, but it's right there. Okay. There's a place near the racetrack. Laurel Racetrack is actually pretty world famous. Well, it used to be. It's fallen down now, but by the river, I'm pretty sure it's the Patuxent River. Like, there's an encampment there that you can't see, but it's a lot of people living outside down by the river. We call them the river people. We've seen them. And it's mostly white folks. There's a lot of white folks out there. Like, the unhoused problem is a crisis in this country. We are in the second Gilded Age. The wealth gap, the income gap, all that shit is presenting itself in a maximum fashion. And I'm surprised we don't have more incidents exactly like this. But the police are there to help out the landlords, to secure the interests of the landlords, not of the people that are most at risk of going without shelter, right? And that is part of the reason why we have to help this system fall the fuck down. If we have to push it down, bring it down, whatever method is necessary, by any means necessary, it needs to occur. But to be clear, this incident clearly articulates and demonstrates why eviction is a form of police violence. Having sheriff's deputies, armed sheriff's deputies, to come to a person's house to forcefully put them out of their home is violence. Whether or not it escalates to that serious, what we saw in Garfield, whether or not it gets to that point or not, it's still a violence. Gentrification is violence. This system does nothing but enable violence, particularly against Black and brown people. And Mr. Hardison that day said no. His aim wasn't that good. He had a bunch of bullets. His aim was not that great. Read into that what you will. His aim was not all that great. But it was a stand that I personally, I'm not upset. I mean, I'm upset for the loss of his family, but I'm not horribly upset at what he did, to be honest. Will, if you could please pop up that article. So this piece coincidentally showed up in the Baltimore Beat. Big up to the editor-in-chief of the Baltimore Beat. Her name is Lisa Snowden. Lisa Snowden is a bad broad out here. We like Lisa very much. And this article is titled "The Lucrative Business of Rent Court." And it talks about the story of Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones' eviction hearing lasted less than 2 minutes. Like most, quote, rocket docket. Isn't that something they call rocket docket? Like most rocket docket hearings, where the judges process hundreds of filed evictions in about an hour and a half. Isn't that something? How do you process hundreds of evictions in an hour and a half or less? Interesting. Curtis Jones didn't even get a chance to speak. When his case was called, the landlord's hired agent took over. The agent explained that Mr. Jones agreed that he owed the money, right? That he owed the rent that I suppose was in arrears, and that he owed the money alleged due by the landlord. Okay, I'm sorry, I lost my place. And that Curtis was willing to waive his appeal rights in return. And also in return, Curtis Jones's landlord would wait 2 weeks before moving forward with the eviction process. The judge entered the judgment for the landlord, barely acknowledging Curtis Jones before marking down that he would be evicted from his home sooner than 2 weeks from that date. No sooner than 2 weeks from that day. And this is, like I said, this is from the Baltimore Beat, so we're talking about Maryland here. It goes on. It said, to the uninitiated, this could seem like a normal court proceeding that helped a tenant bargain for at least a few more weeks in his home. The reality, however, is that this was a, quote, deal that only helped out the landlord. And it was brokered by an agent whose job it was to get Jones out as fast as possible. In actuality, Curtis Jones said that he had a defense against his eviction. Earlier that year, his roof collapsed on him after his landlord had allegedly not kept up with repairs. He was injured as a result of his roof collapsing upon him. Threats to his life, health, or safety, a tenant can use as a defense against eviction filings, and even file their own defense and even file their own complaint for damages against the landlord. Curtis Jones had no idea that he could raise that as a defense. He also had made the agreement without knowing who he made the agreement with. Maryland law allows landlords to hire non-attorneys called agents to represent them in court without the landlord being present at all. The agent has commodified the eviction process, yes, and specialized in filing, representing, and executing eviction cases without the landlord even having to make an actual, without the landlord even having to actually communicate with the tenant. So these agents are getting paid, or roughly to the extent they're getting paid, but the landlord only has to pay these agents in Maryland Renters Court $100 per filing, right? Which is according to the article, a very affordable way for these agents to quickly rack up lucrative fees while themselves not having to be familiar with rental law, with eviction law in the state of Maryland. And these people don't even have to be attorneys. And people are being put out of their homes at a breakneck speed in the state of Maryland. Let me drop this in the chat and you guys can check this out. But the point is, everybody, when we're talking about police violence, we're talking about the murder of a 62-year-old deacon in Atlanta after an innocent traffic stop. And again, we can go down the list of reasons that black folks end up dead at the hands of police that have nothing to do with them either committing crimes or doing anything wrong or putting the officer in danger or any of that. We know that none of that shit fucking matters. All you have to do is be black, right? Because why, everybody? What have we noticed? What do we observe about this American system of policing? Is that white folks don't get paid. That white folks do not get killed for these same reasons, right? Like white folks do not die like this in the same way, if at all, right? Like they don't. This does not happen to white people. So that's how you know this is some racist based shit. Yeah. What's up, Piper? Piper, did you hear me? I don't check Instagram. Piper, I'm gonna send you an Instagram message with my number so you can text me because I saw that you sent a message and girl, the way my ADHD is set up, I can't be looking at all this social media shit. I can only do my show and do Black Power Media. That's it. So I'm gonna holler at you. But thank you so much for being here. But you guys understand what I'm saying, though, right? So eviction is a violence. Gentrification is a violence, and yet this violence continues. And where are all our elected black misleadership? Where's the black misleadership of Baltimore? Where's the black misleadership of fucking Pittsburgh, of Atlanta? Like what is actually going on here? Like our people are being killed and pushed into death. Like unhousedness can result in reduced life expectancy. Yeah. If you don't know where you're going to lay your head, if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, that can contribute to stress upon your life and put you in a vulnerable situation that may not be easy to come out of. Okay. But I wanted to bring you guys that story for the simple fact that I knew when I saw that shit on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, I said it was some bullshit, dog. I said, no, I didn't. And they didn't even show the picture of Mr. Hardison. I didn't even know he was black. I had no idea he was black, but the story just did not sound right. I said, I got to look into this. I knew this shit didn't sound right. I knew it didn't sound right. So we want to send our condolences going out to the Hardison family of Garfield, of Pittsburgh. I'm so sorry that the police murdered your loved one because he was in his family home where he had every right, where he had every expectation to be. If for reasons that the home was no longer in the family name, you better believe capitalism and either white folks or fucking the black bourgeoisie was all behind it. You feel me? Like that was a class attack upon that man, upon his family, and a racial attack. And they knew he was with the shits. And they still came at him with violence. So they should have been fully expecting violence in return.